Edge of Tomorrow is filled with some pretty nifty time loop action, but once you get into all the unnecessary deaths and tactical errors, it's hard to ignore just how silly and dumb it can be. Before we get into the plot of Edge of Tomorrow, let's address its unusual marketing. The film is based on the 2004 Japanese sci-fi light novel All You Need Is Kill. It took a while for the big screen adaptation to get off the ground, but when Tom Cruise signed on in December 2011, the project was officially on its way. A little more than 2 years later, the first footage debuted at San Diego Comic-Con under the Edge of Tomorrow moniker. Now, movie title swaps aren't that uncommon, but Warner Brothers and director Doug Liman disagreed on what to call the film from the beginning. While the studio was happy with Edge of Tomorrow, he preferred the cheekier Live, Die, Repeat. Liman believed that his choice better communicated the plot and tone of the film, but the studio ultimately got its way. After the movie disappointed at the box office, he lobbied executives to switch to Live, Die, Repeat mid-run. And now, various marketing materials can be found bearing both titles. Maybe this was all just a ploy to make viewers as confused as if they were in an actual time loop. Most of Edge of Tomorrow takes place in an alternate 2020, 5 years after aliens called Mimics crash land onto Earth via an asteroid. The Mimics quickly begin to assert their dominance over Europe, with humanity then fighting a losing battle against these tentacled aliens, or so we're told by an opening montage of news footage. But the ferocity of the Mimics and the current stalemate they seem to be locked in with Earth don't really add up. While it's conveyed that entire nations have been lost to the invaders, everyday life seems to be more or less intact for a sizable percentage of the population. There are TV broadcasts, most infrastructure is still in place, utilities are available, and the food supply appears to be in good shape. Sure, Earth is losing, but it's hard to believe that in 5 whole years, a superior and relentless hive mind hasn't completely laid waste to the planet. Although perhaps the Mimics are just toying with us.
We were allowed to win.
The mech suits utilized throughout the film look pretty cool, particularly when sported by Rita Vertasky in propaganda photos. But once our human operators actually start to move around in them, it becomes painfully obvious just how clunky they are. They make walking into a chore, their controls are tricky to figure out, and they require external batteries, which seems fairly short-lived. But the most ridiculous thing about the mech suits is that they offer little protection to vulnerable body parts, as most of the torso and all of the limbs are exposed. Moreover, they don't seem to provide enough structural support to safely encase a human body from a crushing injury. This is curious since the soldiers who wear them are dropped out of aircrafts. To be fair, they're not without their benefits, as they can be outfitted with multiple weapons that can be fired with limited recoil. But is that really a worthwhile trade-off for heavy metal stilts? After Major William Cage fails miserably in his misguided attempt to avoid the battlefield, he's sent to a prep zone under the watchful eye of Master Sergeant Farrell. General Brigham has demoted Cage to private and labeled him a deserter. Farrell, in turn, assigns him to J Squad and tasks the soldiers under his command to ready him for action. The scene when Cage first meets J Squad is one of the parts that plays out over and over again throughout the time loops. The soldiers in J Squad are cartoonishly rough and tumble, and they don't take kindly to having to train Cage, whom they notice is wearing an officer's uniform. While this is all a bit cliché, it's in keeping with the spirit of the movie. What stretches plausibility, though, is that nobody in J Squad recognizes Cage from the news.
Have any of you met me before?
Bitch, I don't know you.
Exactly, yes. Thank you.
Maybe there aren't TVs at makeshift military bases in the apocalyptic future, but just before meeting the squad, Cage claims that he's basically the spokesperson for the armed forces. This is a pretty small plot hole, but it's also a missed opportunity, as J Squad could have had a lot more fun ragging on the new guy if they knew who he was. Cage first meets Rita during the central fight against the Mimics. After a few more encounters and resets, she tells him to find her after he wakes up. So during his next loop, he locates her at a training facility that looks like the most dangerous gymnastics studio the world has ever seen. Large, fast-moving bots whirl around the space, which Rita easily avoids, whereas Cage barely avoids them. Convincing her that he's stuck in a time loop goes well, though. It turns out that Rita used to have the same ability, which is how she became the Angel of Verdun, but her help comes at a high price. Rita spends a considerable number of Cage's loops working with him in her gym, and each time he gets injured, she kills him so that they can try again tomorrow. It makes sense that she puts him out of his misery, but it doesn't make as much sense that the mechanical mimic simulators are so lethal in the first place. Not only are they wasting whole chunks of days every time Cage makes a mistake, Rita's also putting herself at unnecessary risk, seeing as she's lost the time loop gift.
Then you better start over, don't you?
What?
Time loop movies live or die by how much viewers buy into the explanation behind the central premise. Sometimes less is more. Groundhog Day and Palm Springs are both great examples of how you don't really need to get into the science of it all. But Edge of Tomorrow makes more of an effort to explain how its loops work. And while it certainly succeeds in terms of entertainment value, that doesn't mean that it's perfectly logical. The Omega mimic manipulates time as a defense mechanism, and whenever an Alpha mimic is killed, a reset is triggered. The Omega mistakenly recognizes Cage with his accidental Alpha blood transfusion as one of its own, and winds back the clock each time he perishes, with no butterfly effect to speak of. That's actually a pretty elegant rationale for a time loop, so long as you don't dig too deep. Things begin to fall apart, though, when we prod further. It seems like the Omega can actively control time, whereas Cage is a passive recipient. When the mimics are victorious after the initial battle, why doesn't the Omega just choose not to reset things? And why does it reset to an exact but random moment instead of the start to the previous day, or 24 hours prior to each death? What happens if Cage lives more than 24 hours? Would his reset moment change? Fortunately, Edge of Tomorrow keeps moving along fast enough that you can mostly ignore these concerns and still be entertained. Rita warns Cage that if he tells anybody else about his newfound ability, he'll probably get sent to a psychiatric ward. It's implied that this is what happened to her after she told her superiors about it. The only person who believed her was her friend Dr. Carter, an underground scientist who studies the mimics. The two of them have to start each day meeting Cage from scratch, but they still manage to devise systems to keep track of the information they all put together. That information includes two key pieces of advice that Rita passes on to Cage. The longer he has Alpha blood in his system, the more he'll start to experience visions of the Omega. They want to exploit this power to hunt the Omega down and destroy it. Just as important, he must make sure that he doesn't survive if he gets wounded. As Rita tells Cage that she lost the power to reset after she received a blood transfusion following the mimic's apparent defeat at Verdun. This plot point adds high stakes, but it's probably not something Rita could know for sure. She hasn't actually died again and tested out the theory, at least not in the days between Verdun and meeting Cage.
I lost the power. Do you understand?
Rita does die occasionally within Cage's time loop, but since there's no butterfly effect and nothing's permanent, he finds her in the same place every day, no worse for wear. He initially uses his apparent immortality to escape, while also gathering intel on his fellow soldiers and wielding more power within J-Squad. Cage and Rita also harness the reset to try different tactics, in the hopes of either winning the battle in France or finding and killing the Omega. For the most part, Cage learns from his mistakes and makes progress. However, there are points along the way when he makes choices that he should already know results in a loss. In one scene that amps up the romantic tension, Cage and Rita run out of gas and wind up in a farmhouse. He reveals that they've been here before, but if that's true, then he should have remembered to take or find extra fuel. Why would he bring her to the same spot over and over again, where he knows mimics are lurking and Rita is likely to die in the helicopter? It's clear that Cage is falling for her at this point, and sometimes love makes you do stupid things.
This is as far as you go. No matter what I do. This is as far as you ever make it.
The logic of Edge of Tomorrow unravels a bit as it barrels toward its conclusion. Dr. Carter has invented a prototype of a device that he hopes can ping the whereabouts of the Omega. For it to work, its prongs have to be stabbed into the body of an Alpha. Rita realizes that they can try the transponder on Cage since he has Alpha blood. The only problem is that the United Defense Force and Brigham currently have it, and Cage and Rita will be captured if they show their faces at headquarters. After multiple attempts to get into Brigham's office, Cage and Rita finally pull off their heist, but then they make their stupidest decision yet. The smart move would be to stick it in Cage's leg right then, discover the Omega's hiding spot, and dispatch Cage so that the day and mission begin anew. They only have to break in. With Cage's power intact, they never actually have to break out, but instead they try to make a run for it for absolutely no good reason. Maybe the adrenaline that's coursing through their bodies makes it too hard to think straight.
What's wrong with you?
They use the transponder in the middle of a car chase, which does supply them with the location of the Omega, but also results in a horrific crash. They're taken into custody and Cage is given a life-saving blood transfusion. This presumably robs him of the chance to wake up again the next time he dies.
I feel it. I can't reset the day anymore.
You have to suspend your disbelief quite a bit to fully enjoy Edge of Tomorrow, particularly when the happy ending arrives. In the final attack on the Omega, Rita is killed and Cage uses his last breaths to bomb the hive mind. Then he wakes up, not at the base camp as a private, but on his way to Brigham's office in his old capacity as a major. The humans have prevailed and everybody we've met along the way is perfectly fine. Even Rita, who happens to be back in her familiar yoga pose on the training floor. It's emotionally satisfying, but it doesn't quite check out intellectually. The resets are the Omega's defense mechanism. Either Cage defeats it and time keeps moving on, which means that he and Rita die, or it's back again to another loop of the same day. Plus, since there's no butterfly effect, a reset should mean that everything else is the same as well. And yet there's not really any explanation offered about why things play out differently. Maybe it's just the power of love.
Yes? What do you want?